Hey everybody, it's Erik Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Venture Stories by Village Global. I'm here today with very special guests, Greg Isenberg, Michael Galpert. This is round 3 of Consumer Social Annual Roundup. Of course, Consumer Social has been tough last couple of years, so we actually lost one. Donnie Dinch didn't make it for round 3.
R.I.P.
Maybe you'll make it for round 4 if Consumer Social picks up, but the few, the proud remain. Michael and Greg, welcome to the podcast.
What up? How you doing?
So this is 2020, again, round 3. Let's just quickly recap. What's happened since the last time we came on? What is sort of the ethos of consumer right now? What are consumer founders building? You two, of course, were working on consumer social products and have now moved on to different adventures relative to what you guys were doing. Maybe Greg, we'll start with you. Why don't you recap what's different a year ago now today than was a year ago?
So I think one of the big things that's happened is the vertical social network is here and here to stay. And what I mean by that is what you're seeing is a lot of people developing social networks for specific audiences. It could be for your Uber driver or old people or you name it, and thinking about how to do that. And, I think that started off getting really popular with, Discord was probably one of the first ones that hit unicorn status. Yeah. And I think what you're going to see over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years is just a lot more investment. I think the investment community is finally excited again about social, right. And they're going to invest a lot of dollars into vertical social networks. So that's one big piece that I think that I'm happy is happening.
I mean, since we last spoke, I worked on a bunch of different social apps. And eventually decided that I didn't see the market being able to sustain a cheap growth strategy for social. Yeah. And then you look at TikTok as an example, and we can talk about that if it's a social product or not. But they spent $3 billion to get where they are today, and maybe that's the cost of getting scale today is spending that amount of cash. And I come from the school of thought of testing and iterating in sort of smaller communities and seeing what Greg was saying is that you start with a vertical, a core audience, and you build from there. The problem is that core audiences today have already the tools that they need to aggregate or to communicate. And it's just about streamlining that for them in ways that they can't communicate. And that's what Greg was talking about special things for drivers or what have you. So I think especially in the US, specifically, I might have you might have seen that tweeted yesterday, the biggest competitor to any social app in the US is Apple, is Messages, is FaceTime. Because some stat 86% of teens in the US have an iPhone. Yeah. So of course that's going to be the case there. And yes, they have Snap or Instagram or whatever to communicate, but their BFFs is in that world, in the Messages world. So it's hard to sort of surpass that or implement a new form of behavior.
Yeah. It's interesting. Gaming is the forefront of so many things. People said after Twitch, maybe we would see live video for different verticals, different categories. And as far as my understanding, we haven't seen that yet. Is it possible that Discord is sort of might follow a similar trend and that it's unique to gaming, or do you really think, Greg, we're going to see Discords for different categories? And if you were starting Island, obviously Island's had a nice acquisition of WeWork, but if you were starting it today, would you have started it? Would you start it on a specific vertical of type of user instead of you just started with college students, but was that more horizontal in some sense?
I mean, we started with, I've had this thesis on vertical social networks since 2015. You know, in 2015, I said group chat is the new social network, which now seems obvious, but back then people literally called me crazy. I tweeted not long ago a future of social tweet, and I'd like to talk about it. So what I said was the future of social is paid, centered around vertical communities, feels like a game, completely new ways of discovering content, non-broadcast model, has a virtual economy, shopping is a key part of it, eventually has a physical component, has 3,100 plus likes. So I think people really resonated with it. I think if I were to start Islands today, I would have, again, like I had this thesis around the format, group chats. I still believe very much in the format, but I wouldn't have started in college because, you know, the truth is college kids don't have a lot of money. Yeah. There's a lot of opportunity to build paid social services right now. Yeah. People spending $5 a month, $10 a month. So I think like one piece of feedback I'd have for people who want to start social apps here in 2020 is just who's going to pay and who's going to pay a lot.
Yeah. And what are some categories? What could that look like?
I mean, you know, I like the app Hodinky actually, which is an app, a beautiful app, Kevin Rose's thing for watch collectors. Yeah. So they basically like picked a utility which was like really good content for watch collectors, created a marketplace. So that's the other beautiful thing about social is if social and marketplaces come hand in hand. Right. So if you build a community, that group of people will want to potentially buy something or sell something. So I think what Hodinky did really well is they got people in with this really cool, great high quality content. And then they had this marketplace, and then they could add community, etc. And people are buying like Rolexes for like 75 grand. So like, yeah, obviously, you know, that's a great, like, even if there's not that many of those people, like those people will pay.
But if we're here in 2030 and we're reflecting back on, you know, what were the $20 billion exits or $20 billion companies of the decade that were started, you know, post January, 2020, are they likely to be these vertical communities that start off as, you know, something for watches or something for, you know, people in fintech or whatever it is, or is it something totally different?
Think of it. I mean, I think it's going to be these vertical networks, and it might be a bundling of the vertical networks. So I think like when you walk into a shopping mall today, like what do you see? You see all different, you know, you see GameStop, which is a store for gamers. You see like, I haven't walked into a shopping mall in a while, but like PacSun, which is like for skateboarders. It's like you have all these like kind of mini vertical stores, marketplaces. And I think like Facebook is the beauty about social in 2020 is that Facebook Inc., including, you know, and I think I said this on your podcast last time, which is Facebook is the Walmart of the internet. Yeah. So as Facebook Inc. continues to be Walmart-y, there's an opportunity for people to create these like, and I hate the word, but bespoke experiences.
You hate the word because it implies small?
Small, yeah. And like, you know, don't go into a VC, like that's a bad word to say bespoke to a VC because they'll write you off. Yeah. But I do believe that like there's going to be a bunch of experimentation in vertical social networks over the next, you know, couple of years. And then I think we'll be able to see one or a couple leaders who end up expanding horizontally.
So what I hear you say, Greg, is you just are describing the future of commerce as being social. I don't hear it as like the future of social networking per se. So what I mean by that is we have, like, how do you disrupt Amazon? Like, in my opinion, is the way you described it, is you have these verticals, like you're not going to buy a Rolex off of Amazon, right? So you're going to buy it off of a community site or trusted content provider. But in terms of like networking and social stuff that I think about, like how we're going to communicate in 2030, I think we'll still have the same dynamics, but I think there'll be new platforms. And I think that's that's the problem with building social today is we don't have a new platform to build upon. And, right, the biggest quote unquote social thing that has come to date has been TikTok, but I wouldn't call it a social product. It's more of like a broadcast product, like a YouTube, right? So I'm long TikTok because I think that even though all TikTok creators strive to be YouTube famous, I think they can bridge that gap and make it sort of relevant for people to actually care about being TikTok famous, not YouTube famous. But from networking and connecting to people, yes, it'll be around content. I'm always of the belief that social networks grow from the content and not from the people that are there. Like other people say, like, oh, it's about the people that are there than the content. But going back to my point earlier about networks being your like social networks are in iMessage or FaceTime. The content doesn't exist there. You have to bring the content. So if you can provide places that have rich content that you're going to, then you'll start meeting other people. You'll have these like loose connections, and that's what Twitter is like you have the content's there, and then you're meeting people that resonate with the same content you do, or the same ideas. So I don't know what 2030 looks like. Because I think that we'll have a platform shift and the seismic shift, or I'm hopeful we'll have a seismic shift like we did with the iPhone. What that looks like, whether it's like contact lenses, whether that's earbuds that are cooler than the AirPods. I don't know. But I'm still hopeful that there are new ways to connect and still exploring that.
I'm hopeful too, but I think because we don't have that new platform shift.
Oh, totally.
We gotta build what we have, and I think like going back to your point earlier around, well, isn't this just like a good e-commerce strategy? It actually is a good e-commerce strategy. I think that like if I was building e-commerce, I would be thinking about it very similarly. What it comes down to is like Facebook is a lot like Amazon, and Amazon is a lot like Facebook in the sense that it's just like very utility oriented and it doesn't really speak to a particular audience. And if you could create something that really speaks to someone, an audience that is, an MVA, a minimal viable audience, then you have the opportunity to do like it's like you have my attention. Like you've built something for me, you're speaking to me in a way that like Facebook won't. And like when I look at Facebook, it's like speak to anyone on the street. It's like, what do you use Facebook for? Oh, groups, maybe Messenger. Like that's what people use it for. Groups, I think, has 1 billion monthly active users. Like it's working. So, and it's working in this like cookie cutter fashion. So how do you not make it cookie cutter? And that was what Islands was. Islands was a Slack, but for college that really spoke to that audience. And like, the reason we were able to like get such high penetration and so quickly on college was because people were like, "Oh man, like you have the words University of Alabama like on your website, and like you understand my needs, and it's that like nuances that you have to figure out." So like for the people listening, it's like pick your audience that you really know well, that you can like out nuance anyone, and then like think about how you could test those ideas really quickly and cheaply via like landing pages or like just cheap prototypes. Right. Get insights and think about how you can create some utility. I think it was Bobby Goodlatte had a tweet. I don't know if you guys saw it around like V1 of Instagram. Did you see that one? No. I'll pull it up, but basically he was saying how like every great social network starts as a utility.
Yeah, I mean, when Instagram first started, like the first 6 months, the amount of people that you followed was like 1. Like no one had followers or following. Like people were just using it for the utility of the filters and sharing it. So totally, like that's I totally agree with that, and that's like the Chris Dixon thing, which is like come for the tools, stay for the network. post he wrote a while ago. And I think I guess this is the same thing. The way Greg's thinking about it is, I think it's come for the content and then stay for the network. In terms of different ways that you couldn't, like in the Hodinkee example.
I mean, the way I'm thinking about it now is like the updated Chris Dixon quote is "Come for the tool, stay for the vertical network." And like the tool, yeah, most likely it's content because that's just like a great tool. But sometimes it's like something that we've never even thought of that just like speaks to this audience, and it's like really cool and nifty. And it's like when, there's this like narrative around people don't download apps. Yeah. I mean, obviously they download apps. Like look at TikTok as an example. Yeah. But it's thinking about like when someone tells someone else like about what an app is, that one-liner, usually that one-liner is some sort of utility. Oh, I use Instagram because like I can take a photo and put a really cool filter on it and like share it easily with my, so it's like think about what that one-liner is, wrap that around like your utility, find the MVA, and hopefully like think about like the winner, the $20 billion company or whatever is going to be the one that's thinking about horizontal from day one.
Yeah. In addition to vertical, like after they expect. Yeah. I think let's talk about TikTok. So that's the thing's really popped in the last few years. One is just observation. It's amazing that an incumbent didn't figure that out, or didn't, or Vine didn't even get to that scale. Or
I mean, Twitter killed Vine, RIP.
Yeah.
So
yes.
like everyone can blame Twitter for
right.
For
but even
that,
Facebook experimented with video. Like why didn't any other incumbent figure it out? And then two, Ben Rubin came on this podcast a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, TikTok doesn't have identity, so it's unlikely to last." Similar to how HQ Trivia didn't last, Meerkat House Party didn't last to some degree.
I mean, going back to my original statement, does YouTube have an identity?
It's a good question.
For creators, it does. Yes. Right? You're tied to the creator, right? Yes. A coworker of mine and I, we did a TikTok competition, and I'm going to brag. Yeah, so please. Straight up, we basically had a competition of who would become more TikTok famous under pseudonyms. Like we couldn't use our self promo on this stuff. And, she posted like 50 different types of content. I posted 3. I had one that went viral, but it was trash. Like it was total trash. It took me like 2 seconds to do. I'm not going to share it with any of you guys, right? It doesn't have my face on it or anything, but the algorithm gods decided that it was going to hit with, the youth. And it did. And so do I care about that identity? No. Right? But I think but if someone cares about becoming TikTok famous, and that's the thing about TikTok, is why you're posting there. You're not posting to share with friends. Yeah. You're posting to become famous. Mm-hmm. And the other fun stuff, and it has a cool editor that you could use, that you'll download it and post it to your Snap or to Instagram. Like, but people will have multiple TikToks to try different things. But I've seen, multiple accounts have, millions of views, and then they've only posted a couple times, then it's gone. It's like, oh, that person probably doesn't care. To Ben's point, they don't care about keeping up with that game.
Right.
But there are a lot of people that do, and a lot of people like consuming it. Like the most random people have told me, like, dude, my favorite app on my phone is TikTok. And they're not creating, they're consuming. So that's why I give it as a YouTube example as opposed to a social network like a Snapchat.
Is in your mind, is YouTube a social app or an entertainment app?
Oh, it's broadcast. It's straight up entertainment. In the same way, like TV is social, right? You talk about the content. Yeah. But there's no TV, to your point, there's no TV community where I can say like, hey, we're all watching this right now. That could be an awesome vertical network. It's like everyone who's watching The Office right now on Netflix can chat, right? Whatever it may be. And you can build those networks accordingly.
So TikTok popped, and it wasn't this crazy novel behavior. Like we'd seen elements of it before. They just did it right, whatever, packaged it right. And like if we're talking 5 years, building with what we have, to use Greg's point, what else could pop? Like for example, is there a read? In the same way that TikTok was sort of a better version of Vine, are there better versions of Path or Secret or Yik Yak or something else that's location based, or HU Trivia or something else that we're talking the next few years? It was like, wow, this thing is really popping, has staying power, and is based on existing behaviors that never really took off or whatever, or things that existed at one point but didn't pop for whatever reason.
Well, I think in general, like, this is a good framework for thinking about building social apps, which is like humans' social behaviors don't really change. They're always going to care about things like status and reputation and entertainment and stuff like that. I wish someone, and maybe a listener, can create like I know there's versions of this, but like social hierarchy needs and what that looks like. One of my favorite quotes around social is this guy Josh Harris. Have you guys seen We Live in Public, that documentary? So basically, this dude who is like OG pioneer of internet and social products back in the 90s. You guys should totally watch. I think it's free to watch even on YouTube.
It's a trip, dude.
And he basically creates a social experiment in 1999, December, where he invites all these people to like hang out in like underground in Manhattan somewhere.
Are you familiar with the Hype House right now, like on TikTok or like YouTube houses?
Yeah.
So like basically like Team 10 has a YouTube house. This basically forced people into living 24 hours in these bunkers. Wow. Like think about like a Japanese hotel where like people have like different like rooms, you know, like I don't know what they're, those hotels that are called, why is it blanking? But anyway, and force them to live together. And it's always, every room's recorded, their bedroom's recorded.
TVs everywhere. Yeah. Like remotes everywhere. There's like a shooting range. There's like public, like the showers are even public. And it's called We Live in Public because he was foreshadowing basically where we are today and the state of the world where we are today. And he was brilliant about it. And he says a quote that is, Andy Warhol once said that everyone would want 15 minutes of fame. Yeah. And then he was like, in the future, everyone's going to want 15 minutes of fame every single day. And he predicted it. And that's an example of like fame and people wanting fame. So I think like creation of great social, like there's always going to be new social products because, you know, people are the same but different, and you know, people are looking for new ways to interact, but also old ways to interact and ways that speak to them. And I think, I just think that there's a lot of opportunity for people to keep on building.
So to that point, I think we'll have more private networks, like as a response to all this like public stuff. Like you can only play, you're not going to play multiple TikTok games. Like I don't think there's going to be another, like to your point, to your original question is like, hey, projecting forward, what's going to happen? It's like you'll have a response to TikTok of like, is just more Snapchat. Like I think Snapchat grows because the people that are trying to post to TikTok or the people that are trying to post to Instagram is like a completely different behavior. Yeah. And you want that intimate experience. You want more like closed networks, right? You, like I saw a thing today that, you know, more people are posting to, by people I mean teens today are posting, which teens are just like a leading indicator of where everyone else will behave, because as they grow up, that's their norm, and they're more easily, they adopt new behaviors quicker. Is they're using Snapchat private stories instead of having fake Instagram accounts. Like people are done with Finstas. They're just posting to Snapchat. And it's like, because Instagram is now, once they implemented stories, their whole thing is we're just about showing, like bragging, like you're showing that status. Dude, I went on this epic vacation, right? But you're posting the mundane to Snapchat, that intimate experience that you want to share on a daily basis. Right. So yeah, where we go, I don't know. Like I don't think anyone knows. I think you could look back to like what behaviors are people doing in mass. And that was the thing. Like when Vine died, I was like, I think it was more of like a structural thing. Like Twitter just didn't know what to do with it, as an outsider, because Vine was based in New York, Twitter and SF, and they just didn't, and Jack Dorsey didn't need a third company to be CEO of. Like it was really just figuring out what do they do with it. Yeah. And that's why it died on the Vine. Dad. So the real thing is that was a behavior that existed. Same thing with Musical.ly. Musical.ly was a behavior that, yes, it aged out. Like if you were in middle school, you were creating your own music videos, right? Once you hit high school, you couldn't do it. So what TikTok smartly did is the moment they acquired Musical.ly is they started showing off other things besides music videos of people dancing. Like there was like comedy bits and other like Vine-esque things to show that it had a broader appeal.
Yeah. Did Dub Smash go anywhere?
I mean, it still has a large audience, but nowhere near, TikTok.
That's the maddening part about being a social app entrepreneur, is that you can be so close and it's so nuanced, and just like you're like, oh my god, like you're the CEO of Dub Smash and you're like, I have 8 million DAUs right now and I'm like top 5 app in the App Store, whatever it is, and it's like I'm gonna be the next Evan Spiegel, and then bam, something, and I think you're so close. And listen,
why don't they get there? Like the Ben Rubin almost twice, right? With House Party Meerkat, HQ Trivia, Dub Smash, and a bunch of others. So close, got so viral for so long. What's up? Why are they not Spiegel?
Because they didn't acquire companies. So Snapchat, every successful feature that Snapchat has launched has been through an acquisition. And like you could tie it down. They
emojis and
all that stuff. And like even the chat, like
search.
DMs, everything. Like you can map everything was tied to an acquisition, and it's because it's growing a company is not a one feature game. Like you could grow through like network effects or virality or whatever through one feature, right? To what Greg said, you need to get that one line that people know right away, succinctly tell their friends, you got to get this for X. But then they're done doing X. And now everyone, Facebook, Google, whoever, copies X. Yeah. Even iMessage now, like you could send disappearing messages, right? Like everyone will copy that one thing because they're like, oh, people want this. We should implement it. So they're implementing what people want. So fine, great. So now it's the next thing that you can grow that audience and make yourself still relevant till today. And I think Evan Spiegel's done a magical job of like predicting directionality where everyone's going and what we should purchase beforehand. And Google did the same thing. Like all of Google's properties were like in the early days where yes, they had search, they nailed that. It's like, but to become like a juggernaut, you have to keep either building or buying, and it's usually easier to buy than build internally.
Well, and it's interesting. As we think, is attention, attention is limited. You can't create more of it. Have we reached our limits in the sense of for there to be a new thing to pop off, like the next path or the next secret or the next whatever, it has to take time away from something else, i.e. Snap, YouTube, Facebook? Like, is that one way to think about it? And the next question I have is, for the generation 5 years after, 10 years after, now, like, will Snap serve them, or is there always going to be a new social network for every generation?
So, your last question, will there be a Snap for, like, one new Snap for every generation? I think the truth is there's an opportunity every 5 to 7 years for some type of new company to come out. But the bigger companies today are just a lot smarter about building and buying. So it's just the chances are a lot lower, which is going back to your earlier point is like, looking at, you mentioned Ben Rubin's, like he gets lightning in a bottle and he kills it and so close to building like a multi-billion-dollar company. But like a lot of the bigger companies just end up copying all the great work that he does. So there's an opportunity. But the opportunity is less than it's been. Do you agree or disagree?
I think it's the reason why it's that 5 to 7 is because people age out, and I think most of behaviors from social like networks come from teens, and today at least, and I don't like honestly like middle school, like who are copying teens, and there's an interesting shift that happens from when you're graduating from middle school to high school and from high school to college, and whatever network transfers over easily, it'll have staying power for that 5 to 6 years. And right, so like I think it really depends on time, but as well as platforms like or new behaviors. And the reason why Instagram was able to do Instagram and Facebook couldn't build Instagram from day one, yes, they had ego, but also like mobile wasn't a mindset for Facebook, right? Now Facebook's large enough that they have more people working on every startup idea out there right now, right? Shout out to the people working on social at Facebook, but they're literally like teams, like 100 person teams.
Wait, why are we shouting out people who work on social at Facebook?
No, because they're just looking at what's on the market and just trying to build the same thing. Like
they're listening to this.
Yeah, they're listening. Yeah, that's what I was saying. So they have like 100 person team, and if you're like a 4-person startup, you're competing against that. So you got to work on the edges where they can't touch, or they're like, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. And I think there are things that don't make sense right now, and there are a bunch of things that are like, maybe it's a calendar app that's the next social thing. And there are a bunch of different apps in the space right now that are exploring that. There's other different verticals that might not be on the horizon. Audio too. Like, I don't know. Last time we spoke about, hey, there should be like an audio Twitter. As I explored that a bit, I think that from a content perspective, I think it's a content and new networks, and new content networks usually come from exclusive content, and most podcasts you can access from anywhere. And it's in people's best interest if they want audio to be shared everywhere. And there isn't really like stolen audio anymore, right? Like where YouTube was stolen content when it first started. Stolen content is on Spotify, right? Like music and all that stuff is on YouTube and Spotify.
What about the TTYL use case?
Talk about it. Like,
as I understand, is audio social network able to see who sort of what House Party was doing around presence, but in the
I mean the audio that's the stuff that Discord and all this people are trying to do, and it is a behavior, right? So that's a thing that people, or same thing with FaceTime. Like people will be on a FaceTime with video off, and it's just like they're talking to their groups. So going back to original thing is like, if you're trying to connect people that are already friends, it's an upward battle, not because of Facebook, Google, it's because of Apple, right? If you're trying to connect people that are loosely affiliated, you have a better chance, but most of the time it'll resort to, if you make that tight connection, it's like, hey, what's your iMessage, what's your Snap, what's your Instagram, wherever it is, and then you start building that.
My buddy Julian Smith, co-founder of Breather, said, I think he tweeted this, where he said every app eventually adds messaging, which I agree with. And then one thing I would add to that is that every app eventually adds a physical component. So one area I'm really interested in is like less digital only social networks, and social networks that leverage physical and digital, or just use digital to get you into physical.
Can you give an example of that?
Like Soho House or something?
Soho House is interesting. I think Raya is one of the most interesting companies that no one really talks about, which Raya is a invite-only vertical social network, really, for creative people that they charge like $10 a month. So it's very very targeted to that network, and the number one utility for it has been dating. and it's integrated with your Instagram, so you can like go to other people's Instagrams. But ultimately the reason why people pay for it is it's speaks to that vertical, and you can imagine that like someone like Raya could compete with Soho House, which is now a $2+ billion company, which for those of you who don't know, Soho House is like an invite only members club. So I think you're going to see a lot more convergence between physical and digital. And I also, the other thing I'd add to that is, when you're building a social app, you're competing against Facebook Inc. and Snap Inc. And it's hard. And those folks generally purely focus on software and digital. Yeah. So, think about how you could differentiate a bit.
So I'm going to take the counter on that. Yeah, so I think people will connect virtually more so than they do physically, just because it's harder to get out to different places, right? Like, yes, you'll have in major cities, you'll have a Soho House or whatever venue, but you're not going to have different like places for people to connect IRL like you did back in the day, like when I'm specifically in the video game space, where like you would have an arcade to go to or whatever, like you were hanging out next to other people that were like-minded. So you'll start connecting more to people in these virtual spaces.
Maybe. I hope that the next generation of social entrepreneurs are thinking about, and I'm not saying it's, a bad world to just only, to have more digital products, but, are focusing on bringing people together physically in the real world. Because like, sometimes you talk to some kids nowadays and like they just like have their lack of social skills. Like they just like,
oh, totally. I think that
it's like, do we want to live in that world?
That's
and
the
like
internet.
And I think we're at this point where we have to ask ourselves, like, if we're building something, if like what this does to the world around us.
So I think it's like, I agree that there are downsides to connecting people, like without looking them in the eyes, right? Like us being in the same room is a completely different experience if you're recording this podcast like virtually, right? Or even over like a video chat service where we're not making eye contact because like you're looking at your camera, I'm looking at my camera, and it's different angles, and it's awkward.
Something happens in your brain
that's
like
missing.
Yeah.
So I think that I wonder, I don't know what's going to happen, right? If we solve that problem of connecting to each other like face to face virtually, to have a higher fidelity relation, basically like of our the years that our humans have sort of evolved into picking up different cues and micro expressions. But yeah, I think there's an element that we have to create higher fidelity connection is what I would agree with.
That's interesting. I like that term, high fidelity connections. I haven't heard that before.
On the podcast with Ben Rubin and Sarah Tavel, we're talking about new ideas, and we mentioned what sort of new data sources, for example, like social network around screenshots, a social network around receipts.
Man, I love that. I love screenshots. But,
yeah.
But I think it's hard to build because there isn't like an API.
Yeah. Or we were talking about, like, remember Michael Sippy's idea, talk show, like public texting. Could that work? Or Ben was mentioning like a dating site that was like video. And so
I want a dating app. I mean, I'm happily married. Yeah. I don't want a dating app, but I think that the best dating app that never got to see the light of day or to get status was I'm in Like With You, which was based around games. People were playing games and they were chatting with other people that they wanted to date. And it eventually became OMG Pop, which then eventually did Draw Something, which eventually sold to Zynga for like $200 million. So they did something with it. But the original premise of I'm in Like With You, if it started today, or if you're working on that, hit me up at MSG on the Twitter. Because I think that's a thing in terms of, and like Snapchat now has games, and it's hella fun. Yeah. And if you're flirting with somebody, not like I am, I'm just like saying, playing a video game with someone and talking to them creates this connection of just play that I think removes the barrier of like this friction point.
Everything eventually adds messaging. Everything eventually adds a physical component. Everything eventually adds games.
Yeah. Remember Highlight? Is someone going to figure out this location-based, hey, I'm at this event, I'm at South by, I wonder who of my friends is also at South by?
I mean, people have in China. I think the U.S., there's media's too heavy with scaring people around that stuff, around strangers. But, I think Tinder solved that to some extent.
I think that's a great, like, that area is actually super ripe because, like, Facebook is not going to do it because of sensitivities around it. So I think, if anyone's working on stuff in that space, at Greg Isenberg on Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, in closing, let's wrap up. Michael, you got to bounce. A couple of things. One is, anything else worth mentioning that Facebook not going to do, like that we should cover?
I don't know. I think Facebook will do everything. I think it's more about
Facebook eventually adds everything.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more about going back to Greg's original point around doing things that you have a better understanding of and testing and iterating. But I would also say, like, it's not only that if you're building stuff that you have a better understanding of than anyone else, it's you care more than anyone else. Because a lot of times it's really, really painful to like not see the numbers go up or see the numbers go down, but you care enough to like keep fighting another day for the customer, for the user that you're building for, and that's really important. So you have to like care more just to get in the door, I think, and then have to stack on all the other stuff.
That's a good place to wrap. I will ask the closing question. We're going to be here 12 months from now. Is there anything you hope that would have changed or predict might have changed? And if not, we could just wrap on that line. But
I hope Facebook opens up their APIs. I think like the way Facebook wins in this like political space is they take an opposite approach of like having like closed gardens. They have like an open garden approach where anyone can build the next social network using Instagram, using Facebook. I don't know what it looks like, but that could be really interesting too. Like to Greg's point, you had like 1 billion people using groups. Like, open that up. Yeah. But who knows if they'll do that.
I just hope to see the future of social to be these bespoke vertical social networks, because I think that people become their best selves when they're able to really express themselves and feel heard and be with their people and learn about themselves. Like, that was the coolest part about the early internet, which is like you're kind of just like learning, like finding freaks like you. And I just hope that in 12 months from now we can look back and be like, oh yeah, there was also people who made a bunch of money doing that, like building these networks and have billion-dollar outcomes, etc. So let's see.
Perfect place to wrap. My guests today have been Greg Isenberg and Michael Galpert. Guys, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Come back in a year. See what happens. If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Please hit us up at villageglobal.vc/network catalyst.